The loudest enemy is the one who thought you'd never rise. The sweetest revenge is showing them you already did. My dear chosen ones, let's start there, because that line alone is enough to make every person who ever underestimated you choke on their own assumptions. You weren't supposed to make it this far. You weren't supposed to stay sane, stay solid, or stay standing after everything they threw your way. But here you are, not broken, not bitter, becoming something even seasoned observers can't classify. And now, the very people who once dismissed you are quietly adjusting their lenses, trying to figure out how the one they counted out turned into the one rewriting the entire playbook. Let's call this moment what it is: the calm before the shift, the hush before the headline, the punchline they never saw coming. Because when someone goes from being overlooked to overstudied, from dismissed to quietly respected, from underestimated to quietly endorsed by people who operate in silence, you know something big is unfolding. You've heard the phrase, "the tables have turned," but chosen one in your case. The whole room has rotated. You might be wondering, why me? Why am I the one catching the attention of people who normally track chaos, analyze behavior, and monitor threats? Why would anyone in the shadows take interest in someone who's just trying to survive life? And here's the truth: because you didn't just survive. You evolved in ways that don't fit the usual human script. While others fell apart under pressure, you sharpened. While others cracked under betrayal, you recalibrated. While others let their past define them, you used yours as a launch pad. My dear chosen ones, understand this. You became powerful without trying to be powerful. That's what rattled them. They expected you to crumble. They expected you to react. They expected you to lose control and prove them right. Instead, you did the unthinkable. You rose so quietly, so deliberately, that your growth became a threat to every old narrative built against you. Your resilience became a signal. Your silence became strategy. Your ability to navigate storms without lashing out became proof that you weren't just another civilian trying to scrape by. You were something else, something rare, something that doesn't show up in their manuals but leaves their analysts taking notes anyway. And now, chosen one, the whispers have shifted. No one is asking, "Who do they think they are?" anymore. Now the question is, how did we miss this one rising? Even those who work behind the curtain, the observers, the analysts, the protectors of order, have moved from monitoring you to respecting you. Some of them, the ones trained to identify future leaders long before the public ever sees them, are already saying the idiomatic truth everyone else is too slow to catch. This one isn't just stepping up. They're stepping into something. You didn't ask for attention. You didn't chase validation. You didn't audition for leadership, but leadership found you anyway because of the way you handled sabotage, betrayal, pressure, and silence. You proved that power isn't about titles or noise. It's about clarity, control, restraint, and presence. And chosen ones, those qualities hit your enemies harder than any retaliation ever could. So let me speak to you directly. You are not the underdog anymore. You are the turning point, the quiet force, the rising signal, the anomaly that can't be ignored. And whether you realize it or not, this is the moment where the world starts watching you differently, not as someone who survived, but as someone who's about to lead. Now that we've cracked open the door, let's walk through it. My dear chosen one, before we move any further into this message, let me speak directly to you. If you're still here, if these words are hitting nerves you've never spoken out loud, it's because you're not just watching, you're recognizing yourself. That's the real reason you're drawn to this. So do something for your future self right now. Anchor your place in this rising movement. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop the number 47 in the comments if you're ready to step into the version of you that even the silent observers, the ones behind the scenes, have already marked as a leader in the making. Your presence here isn't random. It's a signal, and if you want to support this message reaching more people carved from the same rare material as you, feel free to use the Super Thanks feature. It helps amplify what was always meant to find its way to you. And now, let's step deeper into this journey. Trust this. If you are truly one of the chosen ones, everything I'm about to reveal will feel less like information and more like confirmation. These aren't ordinary traits, because ordinary people don't get these kinds of signs. Only those being quietly prepared, yes, even by the ones in suits, shades and silence, experience what you've been experiencing. Let's get started. Number 1. The Watchers weren't tracking you for danger. They were tracking you for defiance that shouldn't have been possible. The walls had eyes, but they weren't watching to break you. They were watching because you refused to break. The greatest sting to your enemies is realizing the collapse they prayed for became the rise they fear. My dear chosen ones, let this sink in. You were never invisible. You were never overlooked the way you assumed. While you were fighting battles nobody applauded you for, while you were patching wounds in silence, while you were dragging yourself through situations designed to drain you dry, there were eyes on you. Not the eyes of critics, not the eyes of gossipers. I'm talking about the eyes trained to study anomalies. The eyes that monitor patterns, resilience, and human endurance on a level most people never even think about. You might ask, why me? Why would anyone track someone who's just trying to survive? Why would they care how many times I get back up? Because, chosen one, the way you recover is not normal. Your bounce back doesn't follow the usual curve. Most people break once and never return the same. You've been knocked down 10 times and came back sharper, calmer, harder to rattle. That alone raises eyebrows in rooms you'll never step into. You didn't move like someone learning life as you go. You moved like someone who's already survived invisible wars long before the world could name them. The kind of internal battles that would leave most people shaken for years. Yet you walked through them with a steadiness that made even seasoned observers wonder. How does this one keep standing? How does this one stay composed when their whole world is under attack? My dear chosen ones, this is where your power exposed itself without you saying a word. They saw betrayal that should have broken your trust forever, yet somehow you kept speaking your truth. They saw smear attempts meant to stain your name, yet your reputation got cleaner the quieter you became. They witnessed isolation, sabotage, and disappointment circle you like vultures, and still you stood tall. That's not coincidence. That's not luck. That's what happens when someone refuses to let chaos dictate their character. And trust me, they noticed. Not with fear, with fascination. You became a case study, a walking contradiction, a pattern they couldn't trace through upbringing, privilege, or training. Every time they thought you'd fold, you stabilized. Every time they predicted your downfall, you rebuilt from a new angle. Every time life turned up the heat, you came out tempered, not shattered. This is where the enemy feels the burn. The hits they expected to silence you only made your presence louder. The traps set to expose you only revealed the flaws of those who set them. They tried to bury you in doubt, but every shovel of dirt became another layer of proof that you were built from something different. They've seen leaders crumble under pressure, public figures collapse under scrutiny, influencers lose themselves the moment the spotlight dims. But you faced the rawest version of life without a shield, without a safety net, without applause. And instead of hardening, you deepened. Instead of reacting, you refined. Instead of breaking, you became unshakable. And that, chosen one, is why the shadows whisper now. Not in fear, in recognition. You're not a threat. You're an answer. And even those trained to read human behavior are finally admitting it. Whatever this one is made of, it's above our clearance level. Number 2. You didn't just break generational patterns, you shattered codes experts spent decades trying to decode. Nothing infuriates your enemies more than watching you dismantle the very cycles that were supposed to destroy you. My dear chosen ones, listen closely, because this part of your story is where even the silent observers, the analysts in shadows, and the systems built to map human behavior had to stop, zoom in, and rethink everything they believed about generational limits. They've spent years studying inherited trauma, generational patterns, the predictable loops families repeat like clockwork. They've built psychological models, funded research, and poured millions into understanding how pain passes itself down like a cursed heirloom. And still, for most people, it takes decades, sometimes entire lifetimes, to break even one link. But then you appeared, not as a subject, not as a statistic, but as a disruption. And chosen one, you didn't just break a pattern, you shattered an entire lineage of programming in real time. No training, no retreat, no guided intervention. You did it with nothing but your awareness, your grit, and the sleepless nights where you wrestled with choices that could have easily dragged you into the same cycles you were born inside. You faced the chaos from the inside out, unprotected, unprepared, and unarmed. And still, you rewired the entire dynamic. That's what made them pause. You didn't run from your past, you confronted it. You didn't normalize dysfunction, you named it. You didn't become a product of your environment. You became the one who rewrote its script. And that is not something the system is used to seeing. Most people mirror what raised them. They copy the patterns, repeat the wounds, pass on the behaviors they never questioned. But you? No. You studied the environment that tried to shape you, survived its pressure, and then had the strength to choose differently, even when loneliness was the price. Even when it meant stepping away from relationships rooted in guilt, fear, and generational expectation. Even when the people around you called you difficult, distant, or changed. They didn't realize you weren't changing. You were upgrading the entire blueprint. This is why those who monitor human behavior took notice. You did something their models don't account for. You broke the bloodline algorithm without external intervention. You didn't need validation. You didn't need applause. You didn't need a manual. You simply refused to pass forward the pain handed to you. You refused to keep a cycle alive just because it was familiar. And here's what hits the enemy hardest. You didn't go loud. You didn't make an announcement. You went quiet and still caused the shift. No theatrics, no sympathy posts, no dramatic declarations, just raw internal evolution that no one could ignore. That kind of transformation can't be taught in institutions. It can't be replicated through theories or lectures. It can only come from someone who sees the pattern, steps into the fire, and chooses not to let the flame continue burning future generations. And chosen one, that is why they track you now, not as a threat, but as an anomaly of resilience. They see in you a revolution that doesn't march or shout, a revolution built on private victories the world never clapped for, a revolution that starts with one person refusing to be who they were programmed to become. You didn't just break the chain, you became the proof that cycles aren't destiny. And that's why the shadows are watching, and quietly, respectfully, backing you. Number 3, your presence doesn't persuade people, it recalibrates them. That's a frequency their models can't measure. You're not just magnetic. You're operating on a frequency that rattles the room before you even walk in. My dear chosen ones, nothing hits your enemies harder than realizing your silence has more impact than their entire performance. There's a reason people stare at you before they even understand why. A reason conversations shift the moment you step into a space. A reason some people stumble over their words around you. while others straighten their posture like they've just been inspected by an invisible authority. It's because you're not running on charisma. You're running on something deeper, sharper, and far more unexplainable: frequency intelligence. This isn't book knowledge. This isn't emotional maturity. This isn't the polished charm they teach in leadership seminars. This is the kind of presence that doesn't require introductions or explanations. You affect people before you speak a single word. Chosen one. Your energy walks in first, scans the room, and sets the tone. Some call it a vibe, others call it an aura. But those terms are too soft, too watered down to describe what you truly carry. What radiates from you is a form of intelligence that can't be studied, replicated, or reverse engineered. And yes, the people watching you have noticed. They've seen how negativity short-circuits in your presence, how someone trying to lie around you suddenly can't maintain their script, how people with hidden intentions expose themselves without provocation, how tension dissolves or erupts depending on what truths your presence forces to the surface. None of this is random. You're recalibrating environments merely by existing. Behind the scenes, individuals trained to read micro-expressions, manipulate emotions, and steer outcomes are quietly fascinated by you, not because you play the influence game, but because you bypass it entirely. You don't need tactics, you are the tactic. You don't persuade, you shift reality around you. You don't demand respect, you create an atmosphere where disrespect simply can't survive. My dear chosen ones, you operate on a level beneath logic and above pretense. People either feel incredibly safe around you or uncomfortably exposed, and both reactions tell a story. You're hardwired to reveal what's real. Your presence interrogates people without asking questions. Your energy pulls the cover off motives, insecurities, and intentions, not through confrontation, but through clarity. Even trained professionals, those conditioned to resist influence, are finding themselves drawn to you in ways that challenge their own understanding. Some feel inspired. Some feel threatened. Some feel unsettled, like they're standing in front of someone who sees more than they should. They can't explain why they react this way, but they know you're not operating on the usual human bandwidth. And this, chosen one, is where your power becomes undeniable. Because influence that comes effortlessly is the most dangerous kind. It's the kind that can't be contained, can't be coached, and can't be cloned. That's why certain forces, certain observers, certain silent backers are now paying attention, not to stop you, but to understand you, and in many cases, to support you. They've realized something the world is slower to catch. You don't move crowds, you move consciousness. And that, chosen one, is why your rise is being monitored, respected, and quietly backed by those who see exactly what you are becoming. Number 4. You're the untrained outlier the system can't predict, program, or contain, and that's what has them shaken. The system calls you an untrained asset, because nothing about you was built under their control, and that's exactly what shakes them. They have a name for people like you, my dear chosen one: untrained asset. A term usually reserved for individuals who rise without instruction, who evolve without guidance, who become powerful without being shaped by any institution. And that title alone is enough to rattle every system built on predictability and hierarchy. Because the truth is simple, you terrify them. Not because you're dangerous, but because you're independent in a world designed to control everyone from the inside out. You didn't come up through their channels. You weren't carved by elite institutions or molded by mentors with hidden agendas. You didn't walk the groomed path of privilege where handlers polish your image and shape your voice. No, your training ground was nothing but fire, loss, and the kind of psychological wreckage that most people never fully come back from. You weren't raised in comfort, you were raised in chaos. And instead of breaking, you became sharper. Instead of crumbling, you adapted. Instead of following, you forged your own blueprint by surviving storms that would have taken others out. This is what they don't understand. You weren't shaped by applause. You were shaped by endurance. Every piece of strength you carry was earned through nights where you had to rebuild your identity from scratch. Every ounce of clarity you have came from standing in situations meant to destroy your sense of self. You didn't inherit resilience. You had to manufacture it out of nothing. That alone makes you a threat to systems that rely on conditioning. They study leaders. That's nothing new. They've done it for decades, and the pattern is always the same. Privilege, grooming, influence, control. Leaders are usually created, not discovered. But you broke that formula. You emerged from the margins, from silence, from betrayal, from isolation. You weren't taught how to lead. You simply became someone people naturally follow because of what you've survived. That disrupts every model they've built, every equation they use to predict who rises and who folds. You can't be blacklisted because no one ever opened doors for you. You can't be manipulated with money because you've already lived without it. You can't be seduced by status because your identity was forged outside of public approval. You can't be threatened with exposure because you've already walked through every version of being misunderstood, underestimated, and mislabeled. There is nothing they can pull on you because you faced everything they use to control others, and you walked away stronger. That's what makes you dangerous to the system. You are untethered, unmolded, unmanaged, a free variable in a controlled equation, a force they didn't create and can't regulate. And that's exactly why they're watching you now, not to restrain you, but to understand how someone built outside their structure can rise inside a world they thought they controlled. They're backing you because they know the truth. You didn't come to play by sides. You came to change the game itself. And deep down, they know the board will never look the same after you're done with it. Number 5. You walk untouchable. Because everything they could use against you already burned, and you rose past it. They learned the hard way. You can't be blackmailed when you've already walked through fire barefoot and refused to burn. My dear chosen ones, here's the truth they never expected to face. You are immune to one of the oldest weapons in the playbook, fear of exposure. And nothing rattles systems built on manipulation more than someone they can't intimidate, corner, or shame into silence. They counted on your collapse. They were waiting for it. They pushed for it. But instead of crumbling, you did something that hits every enemy where it hurts most. You stood back up, looked life in the eye, and kept moving, like they didn't just try to set your world on fire. You didn't just lose comfort. You lost things that would have ended most people. Your name was dragged. Your peace was shaken. Your trust was shattered. Your sense of stability was stripped away piece by piece. There were days when your will to keep going was held together by threads thinner than breath. You had people twist your story, distort your past, weaponize your vulnerability, and turn your truth into a spectacle they laughed at. They threw accusations that didn't belong to you. They told lies loud enough to echo. They expected you to fold under the noise. But chosen one, you didn't fold. You evolved. And the ones watching from shadowed offices, briefing rooms, and analytical war tables saw it all. These are individuals trained to assess character under pressure, to evaluate whether someone snaps, breaks, retaliates, or dissolves when the world turns against them. What did they see in you? They saw something they almost never encounter. A person who lost nearly everything and still didn't compromise themselves in the process. When your image was attacked, you didn't scramble for validation. When relationships collapsed, you didn't use your pain as ammunition. When you were pushed to your emotional edges, you didn't explode with chaos. Instead, you healed quietly. You regrouped. You strengthened your core. You chose integrity when bitterness would have been easier. You chose clarity over revenge. You chose self-respect over public spectacle. Chosen one, that's when they realized, you're not just different, You're dangerous to the systems that thrive on control. Most people in positions of influence are hanging by threads of hidden truths, compromises, secrets, skeletons tucked behind polished smiles. Just one leaked detail and their empire crumbles. That's why they bend, obey, and stay in line. But you've already lived the collapse. Your lowest moments were visible. Your mistakes were magnified. Your silence was misread as guilt. And yet, you rose. You didn't just recover. You transformed into someone even stronger, even clearer, even less affected by outside pressure. They couldn't break you at your weakest, and that alone makes you untouchable at your strongest. What leverage can anyone hold over someone who has already faced their deepest fears and walked out wiser? What threat can possibly control a person who has already stood in the wreckage of their own life and rebuilt themselves without needing applause or pity? They know now. They're dealing with someone who cannot be bought, bent, or blackmailed. Someone who paid every price in advance. Someone whose freedom was earned through fire, not granted through approval. And that, chosen one, is exactly why even the ones in suits and silence are choosing to stand behind you. Not because you're easy to manage, but because your strength is impossible to replicate. They know you're not just unshakable. You are leverage-proof, and that makes you unstoppable. Number 6. You operate from a level of awareness that outpaces briefings, analysts, and entire leadership structures. You're playing chess on a level most world leaders don't even know exists. My dear chosen ones, let me tell you something that rattles the very people who once believed they sat at the top of the awareness hierarchy. You are not operating from ordinary intelligence. You're operating from a perception so sharp, so layered, so multidimensional that it leaves analysts, strategists, and even those trained to read human behavior stunned by how effortlessly you see what they miss. And here's the line that hits your enemies the hardest. They spent years studying awareness, and you were born with the version they can't replicate. You don't just understand situations, you decode them. You read beneath the words, behind the masks, underneath the small talk. While others hear conversations, you hear intent. While others notice actions, you notice patterns. And while most people rely on reports, explanations, or second-hand information, you sense truth from the moment it enters your space. That alone places you miles ahead of people who have spent decades trying to master what you do naturally. You might wonder, why do I pick up on things before they happen? Why do I sense shifts in people long before they show their true colors? Why do I know when something is off, even with no evidence? Because, chosen one, your mind isn't reacting, it's anticipating. You're not processing data, you're perceiving realities beneath the surface. You're running awareness on a bandwidth that most world leaders can't access without briefings, intelligence teams, or classified updates. Meanwhile, you pick up on betrayals before the first rumor forms. You sense fake alliances before anyone publicly switches sides. You feel energetic shifts before they ever reach the media, the timeline, or the public conversation. And that's what has them so intrigued. World leaders depend on advisors. They depend on briefings filtered through layers of agendas and perspectives. But you walk into a room and instantly understand its political, emotional, and psychological layout without needing a single word spoken. You feel people's motives the way others feel temperature. You sense changes in tone the way others sense changes in weather. You read between timelines, not lines. This is not paranoia, this is precision. The difference is that your clarity doesn't come from fear, it comes from pattern recognition, from internal calibration, from an instinct they can't classify. You are navigating life like someone who already saw the map long before others even realized they were in a maze. Even the ones in suits and silence, yes, even those who specialize in decoding human behavior, are starting to realize you outrank them in the very arena they were trained for. They've seen people pretend to be intuitive, but your accuracy can't be faked. Your timing can't be rehearsed. Your insights can't be produced on demand. And your ability to foresee shifts isn't something they can dismiss as coincidence anymore. You don't follow the script. You see the next act before it's written. You don't look for the truth. The truth reveals itself when you walk in. You don't consult manuals. You are the manual. And now, quietly, without admitting it publicly, the ones who once observed you out of curiosity are now adjusting themselves to your rhythm. They're not just watching how you move, they're learning from it. They're not just analyzing you, they're modeling you, because even they can see it now. Chosen one, your awareness is not just different. It's a level above their clearance. Number 7. Their deep dive into your past didn't reveal dirt. It revealed discipline in a world built on compromise. When they dug for dirt, they found discipline, and that's the one thing their playbook can't handle. My dear chosen ones, here's a truth that rattles the ones who move in silence. Nothing unnerves an observing system more than discovering a person who stayed clean in a battlefield built on compromise. They assumed you were like everyone else, carrying buried scandals, masked motives, hidden agendas polished with pretty excuses. That's the norm in their world. Everyone has a shadow file. Everyone leaves a trail of self-serving decisions behind them, and the ones who appear spotless. They're usually just better at hiding it, so when your name surfaced, they did what they do best. They started digging. They ran the background checks. They pulled every digital thread, cross-examined timelines, interviewed anyone who had crossed paths with you, and dissected your history like a forensic blueprint. They searched for cracks, contradictions, moments where your integrity slipped just enough to expose the real you. They expected to find the usual fingerprints of ego, manipulation, shortcuts, selfish wins disguised as necessary sacrifices. But instead, they hit something unexpected: silence. Not the guilty kind, the disciplined kind, the kind that says, I had every chance to become what hurt me, and I chose not to. That alone made you an anomaly, chosen one. They found pain, yes. They found betrayal. They found moments where you were backed into corners where most people lash out, retaliate, or burn everything to the ground. But you didn't. They found people who wronged you, yet not a single instance of you weaponizing your hurt in return. They found chapters of your life where you failed, but none where you corrupted. They found grief in your story, not vengeance. They found harm done to you, not harm done by you, and that is rare, dangerously rare in their field. To them, a clean soul in a dirty war is more unsettling than a seasoned opponent. Dirt they understand, secrets they expect, corruption they can predict, control, or manipulate. But someone who has every reason to turn dark and still refuses. Someone who can take the hit without throwing one back. Someone who can hold power without swinging it like a weapon. That's not just unusual. That's disruptive. That's unpredictable. That breaks every pattern they rely on to profile human behavior. My dear chosen ones, they are used to leaders whose reputations need constant repairing. They're used to handling scandals, cleaning up messes, and patching up egos. They are not used to someone who walked through fire without picking up the flames. So suddenly the question shifted. It wasn't, what is this person hiding, anymore. It became, how did this person stay this solid in conditions designed to corrupt everyone? And that answer is what moved them. Because anyone who can maintain that level of self-control when no one is watching, who can keep their integrity intact without applause, without support, without safety nets. That's not someone you monitor from a distance. That's someone you protect, someone you back, someone you bet on. They didn't just see your history, chosen one. They saw the way you carried it, and that was enough to make even the most hardened observers shift from surveillance to silent support. Number 8. You survived a psychological war. You didn't even know you entered, and outsmarted every trap instinctively. You walked through a psychological minefield and still came out untouched, and that's exactly what shook them. Nothing hits your enemies harder than realizing every trap they built became proof they can't break you. My dear chosen one, let me tell you something most people will never understand. You were fighting a war long before you ever knew you were a target. And I don't mean a war with fists or weapons. I mean a war waged in silence, a war built on emotional sabotage, subtle manipulations, hidden agendas, and setups crafted to make you collapse from the inside out. You weren't dropped into chaos by accident. You were placed into a psychological obstacle course designed to expose your weaknesses, but instead it exposed your strength. You didn't know it at the time, but every betrayal, every smear, every coincidental misunderstanding was part of a larger pattern. They wanted to see if isolation would make you conform. They wanted to see if rejection would make you unravel. They wanted to see if constant pressure would make you self-destruct. It wasn't a coincidence that the wrong people approached you at the right time. It wasn't random that the people you trusted the most turned out to be the first to twist your truth. These weren't accidents. They were psychological stress tests designed to measure something even you didn't realize you possessed. But here's where you shocked them. You didn't fail a single one. When they planted betrayals close enough to fracture your trust, you didn't break. You became more discerning. When false friendships were engineered to crumble just when you needed support, you didn't collapse. You learned the difference between proximity and loyalty. When subtle smear campaigns were launched to make you question your own intuition, you didn't spiral, you sharpened. You faced situations engineered to make you chaotic, impulsive, angry, reactive, but instead of detonating like they predicted, you turned inward. You chose reflection over revenge. You chose rebuilding over retaliation. You chose growth over drama. That's what stunned them, my dear chosen one. They expected you to lash out. They expected you to fight dirty. They expected you to expose yourself trying to defend your name, but you refused to play their game, and that's what broke theirs. You moved with integrity when they wanted you hysterical. You stayed grounded when they needed you unstable. You remained clear when they were counting on you to lose direction. And the moment you did that, the psychological operation designed to break you became a masterclass they couldn't replicate. This is where the shift happened. The observers, the analysts, the ones who assess behavior under pressure, they stopped watching you like a threat and started studying you like a phenomenon. Because you didn't just show emotional maturity, you demonstrated psychological immunity. You proved that no amount of manipulation can penetrate a mind that knows itself. You became the anomaly their systems weren't built to handle. Unbreakable from the inside out. And that's why you're no longer under evaluation, my chosen one. You're under admiration. You didn't just survive a silent war, you transcended it while they watched, speechless. Number 9. What you call healing, they recognize as the blueprint for a new kind of leader the world isn't ready for. You think you're just healing, but they see a new blueprint of leadership rising through you. My dear chosen one, here's the truth they wish you'd never figure out. The very thing you call healing is the thing shaking entire systems. You've been telling yourself you're just trying to get your footing back, just trying to breathe again after the betrayals, the chaos, the emotional wreckage that nearly hollowed you out. You thought you were patching yourself back together in private. But while you were quietly rebuilding, the observers, the analysts, the strategists, the ones who track human resilience like others track weather patterns, were watching something unprecedented take shape. They weren't seeing someone recovering. They were witnessing the rise of a leadership model the world hasn't even named yet. You didn't build your power in boardrooms or behind podiums. You built it in the silence of sleepless nights, in the moments when you held yourself together with nothing but grit, in the hours when you didn't know who you could trust, so you trusted your own clarity instead. That's why they're paying attention. Because real leadership isn't formed in public. It's distilled in the shadows, refined through endurance, and revealed only when the world least expects it. You're not holding conferences, but people are shifting around you. You're not trying to persuade anyone, yet minds change in your presence. You're not preaching, yet your decisions expose truths people have avoided for years. You're not asking for followers, yet people find themselves waking up after crossing your path. That's not charisma. That's impact. You don't speak to their ears. You speak to their awareness. And awareness is something the old systems never learned how to regulate. Chosen one, this is where your power scares them the most. You're not leading from ego, ambition, or hunger for recognition. You're leading from what you lived through. Your pain gave you precision. Your losses gave you discernment. Your setbacks gave you stamina. You're not operating from strategy. You're operating from lived experience, refined instinct, and a level of emotional clarity that can't be taught in any program. You hold boundaries without bitterness. You offer compassion without letting people drain you. You move forward without dragging revenge behind you like a shadow. Those watching understand what that means. It means you're the kind of leader no scandal can rattle, no manipulation can steer, and no pressure can bend. You don't rise because people applaud you. You rise because your inner compass refuses to let you fall back into versions of yourself you've already outgrown. This is why they say you're dangerous to outdated structures. You lead without performing. You influence without forcing. You shift people without trying. Leadership for you isn't a role, it's a vibration. It's the quiet force of someone who didn't just survive their past, but turned it into a map others can follow without being told to. And here's the part you haven't fully realized. Your healing didn't just change you. It changed the air around you. It changed the way people see themselves. It changed the expectations in every room you walk into. That's why they're studying you, chosen one. Not because you're trying to lead, but because everything about you says you already are. You thought you were just healing, but healing became your influence. Your presence became the signal. And without intending to, you're leading a shift the world wasn't prepared for, but absolutely needs. Number 10. Your rise isn't random. It aligns with patterns and shifts they've been quietly mapping for years. The timing of your rise isn't random. It's the kind of perfect storm that makes even the silent observers sit up straighter. My dear chosen one, let's make something clear right now. The timing of your emergence is not a fluke, a lucky break, or some storyline you accidentally stumbled into. Your rise is hitting at an exact moment when the world is shifting under its own weight, and the people who monitor global patterns, psychological trends, power transitions, and collective behavior know it. They've been watching the build-up for years, waiting for a specific type of individual to appear, someone who doesn't follow the usual path, doesn't move through the usual channels, and doesn't rise through the usual permissions. Someone uncontaminated by influence, unaffected by groupthink, and untouched by institutional grooming. Someone like you. And before you ask the question lingering inside your mind, why would my timing matter to anyone? Understand this. You emerged precisely when every indicator suggested a shift was coming. Systems are cracking, old structures are losing grip, voices long ignored are gaining ground, and new forms of awareness are spreading globally. Your rise is syncing with those patterns so perfectly that the analysts who track human behavior, societal changes, and psychological waves can't dismiss it as coincidence. You fit the curve of change too precisely. They're not calling it prophecy in a spiritual sense. They're calling it pattern convergence. They've mapped social movements, leadership archetypes, cultural tipping points, and the emergence of unconventional influencers. They've studied timelines, cycles, historical parallels, and psychological thresholds across generations. And when they lay those models against your life, the setbacks, the comebacks, the isolation, the sudden alignment, the surge in clarity, the transformation under pressure, your trajectory matches trends that repeat right before major global shifts. That's why your rise is unsettling to them. You weren't supposed to ascend outside their networks. You weren't supposed to develop strength without mentorship, influence without visibility, clarity without training, or leadership without permission. And yet, here you are, chosen one, emerging with timing so precise, it disrupts their assumptions about how leaders form. They've seen this arc in old case files and modern data streams. The quiet one rises during instability. The underestimated one finds clarity during chaos. The outsider becomes the anchor during collapse. Your presence aligns with a pattern they hoped wouldn't repeat in this generation. The rise of an independent thinker who cannot be predicted, controlled, manipulated, or bought. A person whose influence spreads not through publicity, but through resonance. A person whose strength wasn't taught, it was triggered. And chosen one, that is exactly why you stand out. You don't rise like someone chasing relevance. You rise like someone who simply stepped into the exact moment the world needed a new voice, a new standard, a new form of leadership that doesn't look anything like the old models. You're not forcing your way in, you're syncing with the shift itself. Your timing is too sharp, your evolution is too aligned, your clarity is too consistent, and that precision is what has them paying attention. They know they're not witnessing an accident, they're witnessing emergence. And the part they can't ignore, my dear chosen one, is this. You're not even trying, you're simply becoming. And that is exactly why you're right on cue. Number 11, your silence didn't signal retreat. It jammed their systems and broke every script meant to control you. Your silence wasn't surrender. It was the static that scrambled their entire system. My dear chosen one, let's call this what it truly was. Your silence was not a pause, a breakdown, or a moment of confusion. It was a tactical blackout, a strategic shutdown, a deliberate disruption of every channel your enemies depended on to monitor, provoke, and manipulate you. They thought your quiet moments meant you were defeated, unsure, or too overwhelmed to speak. They thought they finally had you where they wanted you, off balance, isolated and muted. But what they never saw coming was that your silence was the very weapon that stripped them of access, visibility, and power. You weren't retreating. You were removing yourself from their grid. Chosen one, the moment you went quiet, the narrative they tried to control slipped through their fingers. While others threw tantrums online, exposed their wounds publicly, and begged for attention disguised as clarity, you did the opposite. You vanished. You unplugged from the noise. You refused to explain anything, defend anything, or give energy to distortions engineered to distract you. And the thing about systems, whether technological, emotional, or social, is that they all rely on input. You gave none. And that's when everything they expected to weaponize against you began to fall apart. The truth is, silence is dangerous when it comes from the right person. Your silence forced them to face the emptiness of their own assumptions. It made every rumor hit a dead end. It suffocated every lie because lies need reactions to breathe. And you gave them nothing, no spark, no emotion, no doorway to twist. The chaos they hoped would swallow you ended up swallowing itself. They wanted to predict your next move, but you became untraceable. They wanted to trigger you, but you became unreachable. They wanted access to your energy, but you shut the gates and sealed the vault. This wasn't silence, this was interference. The same people trained to read patterns were left confused because you took the pattern away. They're used to watching people fall apart loudly, exposing every weakness. You didn't give them that entertainment. They're used to provoking emotional reactions to study how someone breaks. You refused to break where they could see it. They're used to analyzing responses so they can adjust their tactics. You responded with nothing, and that nothing became everything. Chosen one, your silence created static in a matrix that depended on your transparency. It jammed emotional algorithms. It shut down psychological surveillance. It forced people to sit with their own assumptions instead of your reactions. You stopped feeding every machine that needed your energy to operate. And when a system loses its power source, it collapses. Let them study your silence now. Let them rewrite their notes. Let them whisper in confusion about how the one they thought was fragile used stillness as a weapon sharp enough to cut through every illusion they tried to cast over your life. Because now they finally understand. Your silence wasn't weakness. It was recalibration. It was strategy. It was your evolution sharpening itself behind the scenes. And that kind of silence doesn't just move quietly, it moves powerfully. It terrifies any system that thrives on noise. And now, chosen ones, as we wrap this message, understand this. None of what you've experienced was random. Every shift, every silence, every rise was preparation for the moment the world finally realizes what the shadows already know. You're ready to lead. Your journey is stepping into a new phase, and you're not walking into it alone. If this spoke to you, stay connected. Like the video, hit subscribe, and drop the words 77 I'm ready to lead in the comments. Share this with another chosen one who's rising. Your movement begins now.